frame shops and swinging signs creaked in the wind on the street's whole length. The candy-striped pole, which indicates nobility, proud and ancient along the pale-bordered canals of Venice, indicated merely a humble barber shop, along with the main street on Dawson's Landing. On the chief corner stood a lofty, unpainted pole wreathed from top to bottom with tin pots and pans and cups. The chief tinmonger's noisy notice to the world when the wind blew, and his shop was on hand for business on that corner. The hamlet's front was washed by clear waters of the great river. Its body stretched itself reward up to a gentle incline. The most rearward board of the fringed itself out and scattered its houses among the baseline of the hills. The hills rose high and closed the town in a half-moon curve, closed with the forest and foot stomach. Steamboats passed up and down every hour or so. Those belonging to the Little Cairo line and the Little Memphis line always stopped. The Big Orleans liner stopped for hails only, or to land passengers or freight, and this was the case also with the great flotilla of transients. These latter came out of the dozen rivers, the Illinois, the Missouri, Upper Mississippi, the Ohio, the Monongahela, and the Tennessee, and the Red River. The White River, and so on, were bound every whither and stocked with every imaginable comfort or necessity which the Mississippi's communities could want, from the frosty falls of St. Anthony down to the 9 climates to toward New Orleans. Dawson's Landing was a slave-holding town with rich slave-work grain and pork country back of it. The town was sleepy, but comfortable and contented. It was 50 years old and was growing slowly, very slowly in fact, but still it was growing. The chief citizen was York Leicester Driscoll, about 40 years old, judge of the county court. He was very proud of his old Virginian ancestry and his hospitalities and rather formal and stately manners. He kept up its traditions. He was fine and just and generous. To be a gentleman without stain or blemish, was his only religion. It was always faithful. He was respected, esteemed, and beloved by all the community. He was well off and was gradually adding to his store. He and his wife was very nearly happy, but not quite, for they had no children. The longing for the treasure of a child had grown stronger and stronger as the years slipped by, but the blessing never came and never was to come. With the pair lived the judge's widowed sister, Mrs. Rachel Pratt, and she was also childless and sorrowful for that reason, and not to be comforted. The women were good and commonplace as people. They did their duty and had their reward in clear consciences and the community's approbation. There were Presbyterians. The judge was a free thinker. Pembroke Howard, lawyer and bachelor, almost 40, was another old Virginian grandee, which proved a descent from the first families. He was a fine, majestic creature, a gentleman according to the nicest requirements of Virginian rule, a devoted Presbyterian, an authority on the code, and a man always courteously ready to stand up and before you in the field in any act or word of his that seemed doubtful or suspicious to you, and explain it with any weapon you might prefer, from the bridles to artillery. He was very popular with people and was the judge's dearest friend. Then there was Colonel Cecil Burleigh Essex, another FFV of the foundable caliber. However, with him we have no concern. Percy Northumberland Driscoll, brother to the judge and younger than his 5 years, was a married man and had only children around his hearthstone, but they were attacked in details by measles, croup, scarlet fever, and given to a doctor's chance with his effective antediluvian methods, and so the cradle was empty. He was a prosperous man with a good head for speculations, and his fortune was growing. On 1st of February, 1830, 2 boy babes were born in his house, one to him and one to his slave girls, Roxana by name. Roxana was 20 years old. She was up and around the same day with her hands full, but she was tending both babes. Mr. Percy Driscoll died within a week. Roxy remained in charge of the children. She was her own way, for Miss Driscoll soon absorbed himself in the speculations and left her to her own devices. In that same month of February, Dawson's Landing gained a new citizen. This was Mr. David Wilson, a young fellow of Scotch parentage. He had wandered to this remote region from his birthplace, the interior of the United State of New York, to seek his fortune. He was 25 years old, college-bred, and had furnished a post-college course in Eastern law a couple years before. He was homely, freckled, sandy-haired young fellow with intelligent blue eye that had frankness and comradeship in it, and a covert winkle of the pleasant sort. Before an unfortunate remark of his, he would no doubt have entered at once upon a successful career in Dawson's Landing. But he made his fatal remark on the first day he spent in the village, and it gauged him. He was just made the acquaintance of a group of citizens when an invisible dog began to yelp and snarl and howl and make himself very comprehensively disagreeable, wherein young Wilson said, much as one who was thinking out loud, "I wish I owned that dog." "Why?" somebody asked. "Because I would kill my half." The group searched his face with curiosity and anxiety even, but found no light there, no expression they could read. They fell away from him as if he said something uncanny and went into privacy to discuss him. One said, "Appears to be a fool." "Pears," said another. "Is, I reckon you better say." "Said he wished he owned half of the dog, the idiot," said a third. "What did you reckon would become of the other half if he killed his half? Do you reckon he thought it would live?" "Why, he must have thought it, unless he is the downrightest fool in the world, because if he hadn't thought it, he would have wanted to own the whole dog, knowing that if he killed his half, the other half died, he'd be just as responsible for the half just the same, as if he had killed the half instead of his own. Don't look that way to you, gents?" "Well, yes it does. If he owned one half of the general dog, it would be so. If he owned one end of the dog and another person owned the other end, it would be so. Just the same, particularly in the first case, because if you kill one half of the general dog, there ain't a man that can tell you whose half it was. But if he owned one end of the dog, maybe he could kill his end of it and..." "No, he couldn't either. He couldn't and not be responsible for the other end died, which in my opinion it would. That man ain't right in his mind. In my opinion, he ain't got any mind." Number 3 said, "Well, he's a lummox anyway." "That's what he is," said number 4. "A labrick. Just a Simon pure labrick, if there ever was one. Yes, sir, he's a damn fool, but the way I see it," puts in number 5, "anybody can think different that wants to. Those are my sentiments." "I'm with you, gentlemen," said number 6. "Perfect jackass, and yes, ain't going too far to say he's a pudd'n head. If he ain't a pudd'n head, I ain't no judge, that's all." Mr. Wilson stood elected. The incident was told all over town and gravely discussed by everybody. Within a week, he had lost his first name. Pudd'nhead took its place. In time, he came to be liked, and well-liked too, but by that time, his nickname had well got stuck in and stayed. The first day's verdict made him a fool, and he was not able to get it aside or even modified. The nickname ceased to carry any harsh or unfriendly feeling with it, but it held its place and was to continue on holding its place for 20 long years. Chapter 2. Driscoll spares his slaves. Adam was but human. This explains it all. He did not want the apples for the apple's sake. He wanted it only because it was forbidden. The mistake was not forbidding the servant. He would have eaten the serpent. Pudd'nhead and Wilson's calendar. Pudd'nhead Wilson had a trifle of money, which he robbed and bought a small house in extreme western Virginia town. Between it and Judge Driscoll's house, there was only a grassy yard and pale and fence dividing the properties in the middle. He hired a small office down in the town and hung out a tin sign with these words on it: "David Wilson, attorney and counselor at law, surveying, conveyancing, etc." But his deadly remark had ruined his chance, at least in the law. No clients came. He took down his sign after a while and put on his own house. With the law features knocked out of it, offered his services in the humble capacities of land surveyor, an expert accountant. Now and then he got a job surveying to do. Now and then a merchant got him to straighten out his books. With scotch and patience and pluck, he resolved to live down his reputation and work his way into the legal field yet. Poor fella, he could foresee that it was going to take him such a weary long time to do it. He had a rich abundance of idle time, but it never hung heavy on his hands, for he interested himself in every new thing that was born into the universe of ideas, and studied and experimented upon it in his house. One of his pet fads was palmistry. To another one he gave no name, neither would explain to anybody what its purpose was, but merely said it was amusement. In fact, he had found that his fads added to his reputation as a pudd'n head. There he was growing chary of being communicative about them. The fad without a name was one that shall be dealt with people's finger marks. He carried in his coat pocket a shallow box with grooves in it, and in the grooves strips of glass 5 inches long and 3 inches wide. Along the lower edge of each strip was pasted a slip of white paper. He asked people to pass their hands through their hair, thus collecting the thin coating of natural oil, and then making a thumb mark on the glass strip, following it with the mark on the ball of each finger in succession. On his row, faint grease prints, he would write a record on the strip of white paper, thus: John Smith, right hand, and add the day of the month and the year, and take Smith left hand on another glass strip, add name and date to words left hand. The strips were now returned to the groove box and took their place among what Wilson called his records. He studied his records, examining and poring over them, absorbing interest until far into the night. But what he found there, if he found anything, was revealed to no one. Sometimes he copied on paper the involved and delicate patterns left by the ball of the finger, and vastly enlarged with a pantograph so he could examine a web of curving lines with ease and convenience. One sweltering afternoon, it was the first day of July, 1830, he was at work over a set of tangled account books in his workroom, which left to the westward over a stretch of vacant lots, when the conversation outside disturbed him. It carried out in yells and which slowed that people were engaged in. They were not close together. Say, Roxy, how does your baby come on? This was the first distance voice. First rate. How do you come on, Jasper? This yell was from close by. Oh, is middling. Ain't got nothing to complain of. It's Gwen come and counting your bimby, Rixie. You is, you black mud cat. Yeah, I got something better than socializing with niggers as black as you is old Miss Cooper's Nancy don't give you the mitten. Roxy followed this sally with another discharge of carefree laughter. You's jealous, Roxy, that's what you the matter with you hussy. Yeah, that's the time I got you. Oh, yes, you got me hating you. Cry to goodness, and I can see it. Oh, you abstraction and Jasper, if you couldn't follow in your show, if it belonged to me, I'd sell you down the river before you get too far gone. First times I've wronged your mind, your master, is Gwen, I'm going to tell him so. This idle and aimless jabber went on, and both parties enjoying a friendly duel, and each well satisfied with their own share of wit exchange from the wit that considered it. Wilson stepped into the window to observe the combatants. He could not work while the chatter continued. Over the vacant lots was Jasper, young, coal-black, and of magnificent build, sitting on a wheelbarrow in the pelting sun, at work supposedly, whereas he was only preparing for it by taking an hour's rest before beginning. In front of the Wilson's porch stood Roxy, with the local handmaid's baby wagon in which sat her 2 charges, one at each end, facing each other. From Roxy's manner of the streets, a stranger would have expected her to be black, but she was not. Only 1/16 of her was black, and that 16th did not show. She was of majestic form and statue. Her attitudes were imposing and statuesque. Her gestures and movements were distinguished by a noble and stately grace. Her complexion was very fair, and a rosy glow, vigorous health in her cheeks. Her face was full of character and expression. Her eyes were brown and liquid. She had a heavy suit of fine soft hair, which was also brown, but the fact was not apparent because her head was bound in a checkered handkerchief, and her hair was concealed under it. Her face was shapely, intelligent, comely, even beautiful. She had an easy, independent carriage when she was among her own caste, in a high, sassy way withal. But of course she was meek and humble enough when white people were. To all intents and purposes, Roxy was as white as anybody, but the 1/16 of her, which was black, outvoted the other 15 parts and made her Negro. She was a slave and salable as such. A child was 31 parts white, and he too was a slave, and by the fiction of Law and custom a Negro. He had blue eyes and flaxen curls like his white comrade, and even in the father of the white child able to tell the children apart, little as he had commerce with them, by their clothes, for which the white baby wore ruffled soft muslin and coral necklace, while the other wore merely a coarse towel linen shirt, which barely reached his knees, and no jewelry. The white child's name was Thomas Besket Driscoll. The other was named Villette de Chambray. No sermon. Slaves couldn't have a privilege. Roxana had heard the phrase somewhere. The fine sound of it pleased her, and she supposed it was a name. She loaded it on her darling, and soon got shouldered to Chambers, of course. Wilson knew Roxy by sight, and when the duel of wits began to play out, he stepped outside to gather in a record or two. Jasper went on work energetically at once, perceiving that his leisure was observed. Wilson inspected the children and asked, "How old are they, Roxy?" "Both the same age, 5 months, born before 1st of February. They're handsome little chaps. One's just as handsome as the other, too." A delighted smile exposed the girl's white teeth, and she said, "Bless your soul, Mr. Wilson. Both powerful nice to say that. Case only one of them on nigger. Mighty prime little nigger, I always says, but that case is mine, of course." "How do you tell them apart, Roxy, when they haven't got any clothes on?" Roxy laughed proportion to his size and said, "Oh, I can tell him apart, Mr. Wilson. I bet Moss Percy couldn't, not save his life." Wilson chatted for a while and presently got Roxy's fingertips for his collection, right hand and left, and a couple on the glass strips, then labeled and dated them and took the records of both children, labeled and dated them also. 2 months later, on the 3rd of September, he took this trio of finger marks again. He liked to have a series, 2 or 3 takings at intervals of the period of childhood, these to be followed at intervals of several years. The next day, that is to say, on the 4th of September, something occurred which profoundly impressed Roxana. Mr. Driscoll missed a small sum of money, which was a way of saying all this was not a new thing, it happened before. In truth, it had happened 3 times before. Driscoll's patient was exhausted. So was his fairly humane man towards slaves and other animals. He was exceedingly humane towards the erring of his own race. Theft he could not abide, and plainly there was a thief in the house. Necessarily, the thief must be one of his Negroes. Sharp measures must be taken. He called the servants before him. There were 3 of these besides Roxy, a man, a woman, and a boy 12 years old. They were not related. Mr. Driscoll said, "You have been warned before. It's done no good. This time I will teach you a lesson. I will sell the thief." They all shuddered at the threat, for they had a good home, and the new one was likely to be a change for the worse. Denial was general. None had stolen anything, not money anyway. A little sugar or cake or honey or something like that. That Master Parse wouldn't mind or miss, but not money. Never a cent of money. They was eloquent in their protestations, and Mr. Driscoll was not moved by them. He answered in turn with a stern, "Name the thief." The truth was, all were guilty but Roxana. She suspected that the others were guilty, but she did not know them to be so. She was horrified to think of how near she had come being guilty herself. She had been saved in the nick of time by a revival in the Colored Methodist Church a fortnight before, in which time and place she got religion. The very next day, that gracious experience, while a change of style was fresh upon her, and she was vain in her purified condition, her master left a couple dollars unprotected on his desk. When she happened upon temptation, when she was polishing around with the dust rag, she looked at the money a while, and with a steady rising resentment, then she burst out with, "I blame that revival. I wish I hadn't been put it off till tomorrow." Then she covered the tempter with a book, and another member of the kitchen cabinet got it. She made the sacrifice as a matter of religious etiquette, a thing necessary just now, but no means to be rested into a precedent. No, a week or two would limber up her piety, and then she would be rational again. The next $2 got left out in the cold would find a comforter, and she could name the comforter. Was she bad? Was she worse than the general run of her race? No. They had an unfair show in the battle of life, They held it no sin to take military advantage of the enemy in a small way, but not a large one. They would smooch provisions from the pantry whenever they got a chance. A brass thimble, a cake of wax, an emery bag, a paper needles, and silver spoon, a dollar bill, and small articles of clothing, or any other property of light value, and so far from their considering such reprisal sinful, that they would go to church and shout and pray the loudest and sincerest with their plunder in their pockets. A farm smokehouse had to be kept heavy padlocked, or even a colored deacon himself would not resist a ham when Providence showed him, in a dream or otherwise, where such a thing hung lonesome and longed for someone to love. But there was 100 hanging before him, the deacon would not take two. That is, on the same night. On frosty nights, when the humane Negro prowler would warm the end of the plank and put it up under the cold cloths, chicken roosting in a tree, a drowsy hen would step onto the comfortable board, softly clucking her gratitude, and the prowler would dump her into his bag and later into his stomach, perfectly sure that in taking this trifle from the man who daily robbed him of an inestimable treasure, his liberty, he was not committing any sin that God would remember against him on the last great day. Name the thief. On the fourth time Miss Driscoll had said it, always in the same hard tone. Now he added these words of awful import. I give you 1 minute. He took out his watch. If at the end of that time you have not confessed, I will not only sell all 4 of you, but I will sell you down the river. It was an equivalent to condemning them all to hell. No Missouri Negro doubted this. Roxy reeled in her tracks, and the color vanished out of her face. The others dropped to their knees as if they'd been shot. Tears gushed from their eyes. Their supplicating hands went up, and 3 answers came in one instant. I've done it. I've done it. I've done it. Have mercy, master. Lord, have mercy on us poor niggers. Very good, said the master, putting up his watch. I will sell you here, though you don't deserve it. You ought to be sold down the river. The culprits flung themselves prone in ecstasy of gratitude and kissed his feet, declaring that they would never forget his goodness and never cease to pray for him as long as they lived. They were sincere that like a god he had stretched forth his mighty hand and closed the gates of hell against them. He knew himself that he had done a noble and gracious thing and was privately well pleased with his magnanimity. And that night he set the incident down in his diary so that his son might read it after years and thereby move deeds of gentleness and humanity himself. Chapter 3. Roxy plays a shrewd trick. Whoever has lived long enough to find out what life's like knows how deep debt of gratitude we owe Adam for his first great benefactor of our race. He brought death into the world. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Percy Driscoll slept well in the night, saved his house from minions going down the river, but no wink of sleep visited Roxy's eyes. A profound terror had taken possession of her. A child could grow up and be sold down the river. The thought crazed her with horror. If she dozed and lost herself a moment, the next moment she was on her feet, flying to a child's cradle to see if it was still there. Then she would gather it in her heart and pour her love upon it in a frenzy of kisses, moaning, crying, and saying, they shan't. Oh, they shan't. Your poor mammy will kill you first. Once, when she was tucking him back in the cradle again, the other child nestled in to sleep and attracted her attention. She went and stood over it a long time, communing with herself. What has my poor baby done that he couldn't have your luck? He ain't done nothing. God was good to you. Why weren't he good to him? They can't sail you down the river. Hate your pappy. He hasn't got no heart for niggers. He ain't anyways. I hates him. I can't kill him. She paused a while thinking. Then she burst into wild sobbings again and turned away saying, oh, I got to kill my child. There ain't no other way. Killing him wouldn't save the child from going down the river. Oh, I got to do it. Your poor mama's got to kill you to save you, honey. She gathered her baby to her bosom now, and began to smother it with caresses. Mammy's got to kill you. How can I do it? But your mommy ain't going to desert you. No, Da, don't cry. Your queen gonna go with you. She's gonna go and herself too. Come on, honey. Come along with mommy. We're gonna jump in the river. Then troubles of this world's gonna be over. They don't sell bone niggers down the river over yonder. She started towards the door, crooning to the child and hushing it. Midway, she stopped suddenly. She caught sight of a new Sunday gown, a cheap curtain calico thing with conflagration of gaudy colors and fantastic figures. She surveyed it wistfully, longingly. I ain't even wore it yet, she said, and it's just lovely. No, she nodded her head in response to pleasant idea and added, no, I ain't going fished out with everybody looking at me in this miserable old linsey woolsey. She pulled down a child and made the change. She looked in the glass and was astonished at her beauty. She resolved to make her death toilet perfect. She took off her handkerchief turban and dressed in a glossy wealth of hair like white folks. She added some odds and ends of rather lurid ribbon and a spray of atrocious artificial flowers. Finally, she threw over her shoulders a fluffy thing called a cloud in a day, which was a blazing red complexion. Then she was ready for the tomb. She gathered up her baby once more, and when her eyes fell upon a miserably short little gray tow linen shirt, noted the contrast between his pauper shabbiness and her own volcanic eruption of infernal splendors, her mother heart was touched, and she was ashamed. No, darling mammy ain't going to treat you so. The angels is going to admire you just as much as they done your mommy, and going to have you and pulling up their hands forward their eyes and they saying to David and Goliath and them, you're the prophets. That child is dressed as indelicate for this place. By this time, she had stripped off the shirt. Now she clothed the naked little creature with one of Tom's Beckett's snowy long baby gowns, with its bright blue bows and dainty fluming ruffles. Now you's fixed. She propped the child in a chair and stood off to inspect it. Straightway her eyes began to widen with astonishment and admiration. She clapped her hands and cried out, why, do beat all, I never knowed you was so lovely. Master Tommy ain't a bit prettier, not a single bit. She stepped over and glanced at the other infant. She flung a glance back at her own, then one more at the head of the house. Now a strange light dawned in her eyes, and in a moment she was lost in thought. She seemed in a trance, but she came out of it. She muttered, when I was washing them in the tub yesterday, his own pappy asked me which of them was his'n. She began to move around like one in a dream. She undressed Thomas Beckett, stripping him of everything, and put the tow linen shirt on him. She placed his coral necklace on her own child's neck. Then she placed the children side by side. After earnest inspection, she muttered, who would believe her clothes to him look like that? Dogs and cats, if it ain't I can tell them to which from which, let alone his pappy. She put her cub in Tom's elegant cradle and said, use young Marsh, Tom, from this out, and got to practice and get you used to remembering to call you that, honey, and he's going to make you mistake someday and get us both in trouble. Now you's lay, and don't you fret no more, Marsh Tom, and thank the Lord in heaven. You're saved. You ain't no man can ever sell Mammy's poor little honey down the river now. She put the hair of the house in the child's own unpainted pine cradle and then said, contemplating the slumbering form uneasily, I's sorry for you, honey. I's sorry for you. God knows I is, but what can I do? What could I do? Your pappy will sell him to somebody sometime, and then he could go down the river, sure, and I couldn't stand it. She flung herself on the bed and began to think and toss and think. By and by, she sat suddenly upright for a comforting thought upon which had flown through her worried mind. It ain't no sin. White folks has done it. It ain't no sin. Glory to the goodness, it ain't no sin. They's done it, yes, and they's was the biggest quality in the whole building, too. Kings. She began to muse. She was trying to gather out of memory the dim particulars of some tale she heard some time or other. Leslie said, now it's got it. Now it's remember. It was that old nigger preacher that told at the time he come here from Illinois and preached at the nigger church and said there ain't nobody can save his own life. Said it couldn't by faith, by works. There's no way out of it. Free grace, the only way that come from nobody in this law, and he can give it to anybody else he please, saint and sinner, and he don't care. Just the gist is a minute. He select out somebody and suit him, and he put one in his place, and then take the first one happy, forever leave the other to burn with Satan. The preacher and said it would be like they done in England one time, long ago. The queen, she left her happy baby lying around one day, went out a calling, and then the niggers round about the place that was mostly white, she come in and see the child laying around, and took in part of her own child's clothes on the queen's child, and then put the queen's child's clothes on her own child, and then left her own child laying around, and took and toted the queen's child home to the nigger quarter, and nobody ever found it out. And her child was the king's bin boy, and the then queen child down the river. Now once they settle up the estate, the folks, now the preacher said it his own self, and ain't no sin, 'cause the white folks done it. They done it, yes, they done it, and not just the common white folks, but another biggest quality they done the whole building. Oh, was I so glad I remember about that. She got lighthearted and happy and went to the cradles and spent what was left of the night practicing. She would give her own child a light pat and say humbly, lay still, Master Tom. Then give the real Tom pat and say with severity, lay still, Chambers. Does you want me to take it out someplace to you? And she progressed with her own practice. She was surprised to see how steady and surely, with all, kept her tongue reverent and her manner humble down to a young master, was transferring itself to her speech and manner towards the usurper, and similarly handy she was becoming, transferring her muttered curtness of speech and peremptory manner to the unlucky hair of the ancient house of Driscoll. She took occasional rest from practicing and absorbed herself in calculating her chances. They'll sell these niggers today for stealing their money. Then they buy some more that ain't their chillin', and that's what they do all right. When I take the chillin' out and get air, ain't the minute around the corner I squint. They mouth around with jam, they can't. Nobody knows they's changed. It's I can do it, it's safe. If it's a year. There ain't but one man that can that's our beer, and that's Pudd'nhead Wilson. Let's call him Pudd'nhead and say he's a fool. Well, my land, that man ain't no more fool than I is. He's the smartest man in this town, unless in his Judge Driscoll or maybe Penn Howard. Blame that man. He worries me with them ornery glasses of his'n, and I believe he's a witch, but never mind, it's going to happen around. That's one of these days, and let on that I reckon he changes want to print a chilling's fingers again. And if he don't notice they's changed, I bound there ain't nobody gonna notice it. Then I say for sure, but I reckon I told around a horseshoe to keep off the witch work. The new Negroes gave Roxy no trouble, of course, and the master gave her none, for one of his speculations was in jeopardy, and his mind was so occupied that he hardly saw the children when he looked at both of them, and all Roxy had to do was get them both into a gale of laughter when it came about, and then their faces was mainly cavities, exposing gums, and he was gone again before the spasm passed and the little creatures resumed a human aspect. Within a few days, the fate of the speculation became so dubious that Mr. Purser went away with his brother to judge to see what could be done with it. It was a land speculation, and as usual, it had gotten complicated with a lawsuit. The men had gone 7 weeks. Before they got back, Roxy had paid a visit to Wilson and was satisfied. Wilson took the fingerprints, labeled them with names, and date October the 1st, and put them carefully away. Continued his chat with Roxy, who seemed very anxious that he should admire great advance in flesh, the beauty of which the babes had made since he took their fingerprints a month before. He complimented their improvement to her contentment, and they were without any disguise of jam or other stain. She trembled all the while and was miserably frightened, left any moment But it didn't. He discovered nothing, and she went home jubilant and dropped all concern of the matter permanently out of her mind. Chapter 4, The Way of Changelings. Adam and Eve had many advantages, but the principal one was that they escaped heathen. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. There is the trouble about special providences, namely they are so often in doubt as to which party was intended to be beneficiary. In the case of the children, the bears, and the prophet, the bears got more real satisfaction out of the episode than the prophet did, because they got the children. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. The history must henceforth accommodate itself with the change which Roxana has consummated and called the real heir Chambers, and the usurping little slave Thomas à Becket, shortening the latter name to Tom for daily use, as people did about him. Tom was a bad baby from the very beginning of his usurpation. He would cry for nothing, he would burst into storms of devilish tempers without notice and let go scream after scream and squall after squall, and climax the thing with holding of his breath. That frightful specialty of teething nurslings, in the throes of which the creature exhausts its lungs, then is convulsed with noiseless squirmings and twistings and kickings in the effort to get its breath, while the lips turn blue, and the mouth stands wide and rigid, offering for inspection one wee tooth, set in the lower rim of a hoop of red gums, and when the appalling stillness is endured until one is sure the lost breath will never return, a nurse comes flying and dashes water in the child's face, and presto, the lungs fill, and instantly discharge a shriek, or a yell, or a howl, which bursts the listening ear, and surprises the owner in saying words which would not go well with the halo if he had one. The baby Tom would claw anybody who came within reach of his nails and pound anybody who could reach with his rattle. He would scream for water till he got it, and then throw the cup and all on the floor and scream for more. He was indulged in all his caprices, howsoever troublesome and exasperating they might be. He was allowed to eat anything he wanted, particularly things that would give him a stomach ache. When he got old enough to begin to toddle about and say broken words and get an idea of what his hands were for, he was more consummate pest than ever. Roxy got no rest while he was awake. He would call for anything and everything he saw. Simply say, "Want it," which was a command. When it was brought, he would, in a frenzy and a motioning way with his hand, "Don't want it, don't want it." The moment it was gone, he would set frantic yells, "I want it, I want it." And Roxy had to give wings to her heels to get that thing back from him again before he could get time and carry his intentions of going into convulsions about it. What he preferred above all other things was the tongs. This was because his father had forbidden him to have them, left to break windows and furnitures with them. The moment Roxy's back was turned, he would toddle to the presence of the tongs and say, "Like it," and cock his eye to one side and see if Roxy had observed them. "I want it," and cock his eye again. Then "Have it," with a furtive glance, and finally "Take it," and the prize was his. The next moment the heavy implement was raised aloft, and next there was a crash and a squall, and the cat was off on 3 legs to meet an engagement. Roxy would arrive just as the lamp or window went with an interminable smash. Tom got all the petting, and Chambers got none. Tom got all the delicacies. Chambers got mush and milk and clabber without sugar. In consequence, Tom was a sickly child, and Chambers wasn't. Tom was fractious, as Roxy called it, and overbearing. Chambers was meek and docile. With all of her splendid common sense and practical everyday ability, Roxy was a doting fool of a mother. She was this towards her child, and she was more than this. By fiction she created by herself, he was becoming her master. The necessity of recognizing this relation outwardly and perfecting herself in forms required to express any recognition had moved her to such diligence and faithfulness, and the practicing of these forms of exercise soon concerned himself with the rest of the habit, became automatic and unconscious, and naturally the result followed. Deceptions intended solely for the others gradually grew practically into self-deceptions as well. The mock reverence became real reverence, the mock homage real homage. The little counterfeit rift and separation between imitation slave and imitation master widened and became an abyss, a very real one. And on one side of it stood Roxy, the dupe of her own deceptions, and the other side stood a child, no longer a servant to her, but her accepted and recognized master. He was her darling, her master, and her deity, all in one. In her worship of him, she forgot who she was and what he had been. In babyhood, Tom cuffed and banged and scratched Chambers, unrebuked, and in early learned that the meekly and bearing and resenting it the advantage which all lay in former policy, the few times that his persecutions had moved him beyond control and made him fight back had cost him very dear at headquarters, not at the hands of Roxy, for if she ever went beyond scolding him sharply and forgetting who his young master was, she at least extended her punishment beyond the box to the ear. No, Percy Driscoll was a person. She told Chambers under no provocation whatever he was privileged to lift his hand against his little master. Chambers overstepped the line 3 times and got 3 such convincing cannons from the man who was his father he didn't know it. He was more took Tom's cruelties and humility after that and made no more experiments. Outside the house, the 2 boys were together almost all through boyhood. Chambers was strong behind his years and a good fighter. Strong because he was culture fed and hard worked about the house, and a good fighter because Tom furnished him plenty of practicing and white boys from whom he hated and was afraid of. Chambers was his constant bodyguard and to and from school and present on the playground at recess to protect his charge. He fought himself in such a formidable reputation by and by that Tom could have changed clothes with him and ridden in peace like Sir Kay in Lancelot's armor. He was good at games of skill, too. Tom skated him with marbles and played keeps with and then took all the winnings away from him. In the winter season, Chambers was on hand in Tom's worn-out clothes with holly red mittens and holey shoes and pants holey at the knees and seat to drag a sled up the hill for Tom, warmly clad to ride down on, but he never got to ride himself. He built snowmen and snow fortifications under Tom's directions. He was Tom's patient target when Tom wanted to do some snowballing, but the target couldn't fire back when Chambers carried Tom's skates to the river and strapped them on him and trotted around with him on the ice as if to be on hand when wanted. He wasn't ever asked to try the skates on himself. In summer, the pastime of the boys was Dawson's Landing, was to steal apples, peaches, and melons from the farm's fruits wagons, mainly on account of the risk they ran getting their heads laid open with the butt of the farmer's whip. Tom was the distinguished adept at these steps. By proxy, Chambers did his stealing and got the peach stones, apple cores, and melon rinds for his share. Tom always made Chambers go swimming with him, stay by him as protection. When Tom had had enough, he would slip out and tie knots in Chambers' shirt, dip the knots in the water and make them hard to undo, and dress himself, sit by and laugh, while naked shiver tugged at the stubborn knots with his teeth. Tom did his humble comrade these various ill turns, partly out of Nate's viciousness, partly because he hated him for his superiorness of physique and pluck, and for his manifold cleverness. Tom couldn't dive, for it gave him splitting headaches. Chambers could dive without inconvenience, and found doing it. He was so excited by admiration one day among a crowd of white boys by throwing back somersaults from the stern of a canoe that wearised Tom's spirits, and at last he shoved the canoe underneath Chambers while he was in the air, so it came down upon the head of the canoe bottom. While lay unconscious, several of Tom's ancient adversaries saw their long-desired opportunity to come. They gave the false heir such a drubbing that with Chambers' best help, he was hardly able to drag him home afterwards. When the boys was 15 and upward, Tom was showing off in the river one day when he was taken with a cramp and shouted for help. It was a common trick with the boys, particularly if a stranger was present, to pretend to cramp and howl for help. When the stranger came tearing hand over hand to the rescue, the howler would go on struggling and howling until he was close at hand. They replaced the howls with sarcastic smile and swim blandly by, while the town boys assailed the dupe with a volley of jeers and laughter. Tom had never tried the stroke as yet and was supposed to be trying it now, so the boys held warily back while Chambers believed his master was in earnest. Therefore he swam out, arrived in time unfortunately, and saved his life. This was a feather Tom had managed to endure everything else, but to have us remain publicly and permanently under such an obligation as to a nigger, and this nigger of all niggers, this was too much. He heaped insults upon Chambers for pretending to think he was in earnest in calling for help, and said that nobody but a blockhead nigger would have known he was funning and had left him alone. Tom's enemies was in strong force here, and they came out with their opinions quite freely. They laughed at him and called him a coward, liar, sneak, and other sorts of pet names, and told him they meant to call Chambers by a new name after this, make it a common in town, Tom Driscoll's Nigger Pappy, to signify he had a second birth into this life, and Chambers was the author of this new being. Tom grew furious under these frantic taunts and shouted, "Knock their heads off, Chambers! Knock their heads off! What do you stand there with your hands in your pocket for?" Chambers expostulated and said, "But Master Tom, there's too many of them. Do you hear me? Please, Master Tom, don't make me. There's so many of them. Tom sprang at him and drove his pocket knife into him 2 or 3 times before the boys could snatch him away and give the wounded lad a chance to escape. He was considerably hurt, but not seriously. If the blade had been a little longer, his career would have ended there. Tom had long since taught Roxy her place. It had been many a day now since he had ventured a caress or two, finding epitaph in his quarter. Such things from a nigger were repulsive to him, and she had been wont to keep her distance. Remember who she was. She saw her darling gradually cease from being her son. She saw that detail perish utterly. All that was left was Master, pure and simple, and not a She saw herself sink from sublime height of motherhood to somber depths of unmodified slavery. The abyss of separation between her and her boy was complete. She was merely a shadow now, his convenience, his dog, his cringing and helpless slave, the humble and unresisting victim of his capricious temper and vicious nature. Sometimes she could not go to sleep, even when worn out from fatigue, because her rage boiled so high over the day's experiences with her boy. She would mumble and mutter to herself, "He strung me out, wasn't no way to blame. Struck me in the face right before folks, and he's always called me nigger, wench, and hussy, and all them mean names, and when I do my very best I can. Oh Lord, I've done so much for him, I lift him away. There's what could have been in this, and this is what I get for it." Sometimes, when outrage or particular offensiveness stung her in heart, she would plan schemes of vengeance and revel in the fancied spectacle of his exposure to the world as an impostor and a slave. But in the midst of these joys, fears would strike her. She had made him too strong. She could prove nothing. In heaven, she might get sold down the river for her pains. So her schemes always went for nothing, and she laid them aside in impotent rage and fates, and against herself playing the fool on that fatal September day, and not providing herself with a witness for use on the day when such a thing might be needed for the appeasing of a vengeance-hungry heart. And yet the moment Tom happened to be good to her, and kindness occurred every now and then, all her sore places were healed. And she was happy and proud, for this was her son, her nigger son, lauding it among the whites and secure and avenging their crimes against her race. There were 2 grand funerals in Dawson's Landing that fall of 1845. One was of Colonel Cecil Burleigh, Essex, the other of Percy Driscoll. On his deathbed, Driscoll set Roxy free and delivered his idolized, ostensible son solemnly into the keeping of his brother, the judge, and his wife. Those childish people were glad to get him. Childless people are not difficult to please. Judge Driscoll had gone privately to his brother a month before and bought chambers. He had heard Tom was trying to get his father to sell the boy down the river, and he wanted to prevent scandal, for public sentiment did not approve of the way of treating family servants for light cause, for no cause. Percy Driscoll had worn himself out in trying to save his speculative landed estate, and he died without succeeding. He was hardly in the grave before the boom collapsed and left his envied young devil of an heir a pauper. But that was nothing. His uncle told him he should come to his heir and have all his fortunes when he died, so Tom was comforted. Roxy had no home now. She resolved to go around and say goodbye to her friends, and then clear out and see the world. That is, say, she would go chambermaiding on a steamboat, the darling ambition of her race and sex. Her last call was on the black giant Jasper. She found him chopping Pudd'nhead Wilson's winter provision of wood. Wilson was chatting with him when Roxy arrived. He asked her how she could bear to go off chambermaiding and leave her boys, and chaffingly offered to her a copy of a series of their fingerprints, reaching up to their 12th year, for her to remember them by. But she sobered in a moment, wondering if he suspected anything. Then she said, believed she didn't want them. Wilson said to himself, the drop of black blood in her is superstitious. She thinks there's some deviltry, some witch business about my glass mistress somewhere. She used to come here with an old horseshoe in her hand. It could have been an accident, but I doubt it. Chapter 5, The Twin Thrill of Dawson's Landing. Training is everything. The peach was once a bitter almond. Cauliflower is nothing but cabbage with a college education. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Remark of Dr. Baldwin's concerning upstarts. We don't care to eat toadstools that think they're truffles. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Mrs. York Driscoll enjoyed 2 years of bliss with her prize Tom. Bliss was troubled a little at times, it's true, but bliss nevertheless. Then she died, and her husband and his childless sister, Mrs. Pratt, continued this bliss business at the old stand. Tom was petted and indulged and spoiled to his entire content, nearly that. This went on till he was 19 and he was sent to Yale. He was handsomely equipped with conditions, but otherwise he was not an object of distinction there. He remained at Yale 2 years and then threw up the struggle. He came home with the manners a good deal improved. He had lost his surliness, brusqueness, and was rather pleasantly soft and smooth now. He was furtively and sometimes openly ironical of speech and given to gently touching people on the raw. But he did it with good-natured, semi-conscious air that was carried off safely and kept him from getting into trouble. He was indolent as ever and showed no strenuous desire to hunt up an occupation. People argued that he preferred to be supported by his uncle, and his uncle's shoes till it become vacant. He brought back 1 or 2 new habits with him, one which he rather openly practiced, tippling, but concealed another, which was gambling. It would not do to gamble where his uncle could hear of it. He knew that quite well. Tom's Eastern polish was not popular among the young people. They could have endured it, perhaps, if Tom had stopped there. But he wore gloves, and that they couldn't stand and wouldn't, so he was mainly without society. He brought home with him a suit of clothes of such exquisite style and cut in fashion, Eastern fashion, city fashion, that filled everybody with anguish and was regarded as peculiarly wanton of front. He enjoyed the feeling that she was exciting and paraded to town serene and happy all day, but the young fellas set a tailor to work that night, and when Tom started out on his parade next morning, he found the old deformed Negro bell ringer straddled along in his wake, tricked out in flamboyant curtain calico exaggeration of his finery, and imitating his fancy Eastern graces as well as he could. Tom surrendered, and after that he clothed himself in a local fashion, but dull country town was tiresome to him. Since his acquaintanceship with livelier regions, he grew daily more and more so. He began to make little trips to St. Louis for refreshment, and he found companionship to suit him and pleasures to his taste, along with more freedom in some particulars there he could have had at home. So during the next 2 years, his visits to his city grew in frequency, and his terrors there grew steadily longer in duration, which he was guiding into deep waters. He was taking chances privately, which might get him to trouble someday. In fact, dead. Judge Driscoll had retired from the bench and from all business activities in 1850, and now there had been comfortably idle 3 years. He was president of the Free Thinkers Society, and Pudd'nhead Wilson was the other member. The society's weekly discussions were now in the old law's main interest in life. Pudd'nhead was still toiling in obscurity at the bottom of the ladder under the blight of that unlucky remark which he had let fall 23 years before about that dog. Judge Driscoll was his friend and claimed that he had a mind above the average, but that was regarded as one of the judge's whims, and it failed to modify the public opinion, or rather, one of the reasons why it failed. And there was another, a better one. If the judge had stopped with the bare assertion, it would have had a good deal of effect, but he made the mistake of trying to prove his position. For some years, Wilson had been privately at work on a whimsical almanac for his amusement, a calendar with a little dab of ostensible philosophy, usually in ironical form, appended to each date, and the judge thought that these quips and fancies of Wilson's were nearly turned and cute, so he carried a handful of them one day and read some of them to the chief citizens. But irony was not for these people. Their mental vision was not focused for it. They read those playful trifles in the solidest terms and decided without hesitancy that there had ever been any doubt that Dave Wilson was a pudd'n head, which there hadn't. This revelation removed that doubt for good and all. That is just the way this world. An enemy can partly ruin a man, but it takes a good-natured, injudicious friend to complete the thing and make it perfect. After this, the judge felt tenderer than ever towards Wilson, and surer than ever this calendar had merit. Judge Driscoll could be a free thinker and still hold his place in society because he was the person of most consequence to the community, and therefore he could venture to go his own way and follow out his own notions. The other member of his pet organization was allowed like liberty because he was a cipher in the estimation of the public, and nobody attached any importance to what he thought or did. He welcomed enough all around, but he didn't seem to count for anything. The widow Cooper, affectionately called Aunt Patsy by everybody, lived in snug and comely cottage with her daughter Rowena, who was 19, romantic, amiable, and very pretty, but otherwise of no consequence. Rowena had a couple brothers, also of no consequence. The widow had a large spare room, which she set to a lodger with board when she could find one, but this room had been empty for a year now. To her sorrow, her income was only sufficient for the family support, and she needed lodging money for trifling luxuries. But now at last, on a flaming June day, she found herself happy. Her tedious wait was ended. Her year-worn advertisement had been answered, not by a village applicant. No. This letter was from way off yonder, a dim great world to the north. It was from St. Louis. She sat on her porch, gazing out with unseeing eyes upon the shining reaches of the mighty Mississippi, her thoughts steeped in her good fortune. Indeed, it was specially good fortune, for she was hired to have 2 lodges instead of 1. She had read the letter to the family, and Rowena danced away to see the cleaning and airing of the room by the slave woman Nancy, and the boys rushed abroad in town and spread the great news. What was a matter of public interest, and the public would wonder and not be pleased if informed. Presently, Rowena returned, all ablush with joyous excitement, and begged for a rereading of the letter. It was framed thus: Honored Madame, my brother and I have seen your advertisement by chance and beg leave to the room you offer. We are 24 years of age and twins. We are Italian by birth. We have lived long in various countries in Europe and several years in the United States. Our names are Luigi and Angela Campella. We desire but one guest. But, dear madam, if you allow us to pay for 2, we will not incommodate you. We shall be down Thursday. Italians, how romantic. Just think, Ma, there's never been one in our town. Everybody was dying to see them, and they're all ours. Think of that. Yes, I reckon they'll make a grand stir. Oh, indeed they will. The whole town will be here on its head. Think they've been to Europe and everywhere. There's never been a traveler in this town before, Ma. I shouldn't wonder if they've seen kings. Well, about it can't tell. They'll make a stir enough without that. Yeah, that's of course. Luigi and Angelo, they're lovely names, and so grand and foreign, not like this Jones and Robinsons and such. Thursday they're coming. This only Thursday. It's only Tuesday. Been a long, cruel time to wait. Here comes Judge Driscoll in at the gate. He's heard about it. I'll go and open the door. The judge was full of congratulations and curiosity. The letter was read and discussed. Soon, Justice Robinson arrived with more congratulations, and there was a new reading and a new discussion. This was the beginning. Neighbor after neighbor of both sexes followed, and the procession drifted in and out all day, evening, and all Thursday and Wednesday. The letter was read and reread until it was nearly worn out. Everybody admired its courtly and its gracious tone, its so smooth and practiced style. Everybody was sympathetic and excited, and the Coopers were steeped in happiness all the while. The boats were very uncertain in low water in these primitive times. This time Thursday, boating had arrived at 10, and not so. The people waited by the landing all day for nothing, and they were driven to their homes by a heavy storm without having had a view. of the illustrious foreigners. 11 o'clock came, and the Cooper house was the only one in town that still had lights burning. Rain and thunder were booming yet, and the anxious family was still waiting and still hoping. At last there was a knock on the door, and the family jumped open it. 2 Negro men entered, each carrying a trunk, and proceeded upstairs towards the guest room. Then entered the twins, the handsomest, the best dressed, the most distinguished-looking pair of young fellows the West had ever seen. One was a little fatter than the other, but otherwise they was exact duplicates. Chapter 6, Swimming in Glory. Let us endeavor so to live when we cannot come to die. Even the undertaker will be sorry. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Habit is habit, and not to be flung out the window by any man, but coaxed downstairs a step at a time. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. At breakfast in the morning, twins Charmer Manor, an easy and polished baron, made speedy conquest of the family's good graces. A constraint and formality quickly disappeared, and the friendliest feeling succeeded. Aunt Patsy called them by their Christian names almost from the beginning. She was full of the keenest curiosity about them and showed it. They responded by talking about themselves, which pleased her greatly. It presently appeared that in their early youth they had known poverty and hardship. As the talk wandered along, the old lady watched for the right place to drop a question or two concerning that matter. When she found it, she said to the blonde twin, who was now doing biographies in his turn, while the brunette one rested, "If it ain't asking, well, I know I'd ask, Mr. Anslow, how do you come so friendless and such trouble when you were so little? Do you mind telling? But don't if you do." "Oh, we don't mind at all, madame. In our case, it was merely misfortune, nobody's fault. Our parents were well-to-do. They were in Italy, and we were their only child. We were given to the old Florida nobility." Rowena's heart gave great bound. Her nostrils expanded with a fine light playing in her eyes. And when the war broke out, my father was on the losing side and had to fly for his life. His estates were confiscated, his personal property seized. And there we were, in Germany, strangers, friendless, and in fact paupers. My brother and I were 10 years old, well educated for that age, very studious, very fond of our books, and well grounded in German, French, Spanish, and English language. Also, we were marvelous musical prodigies, and if you allow me to say it, being only told the truth, our father survived his misfortunes only a month, and our mother soon followed him, and we were alone in the world. Our parents could have made themselves comfortable by exhibiting us at a show, and they had left many large offers, but thought revolted their pride, and they said they would starve and die first, but they wouldn't consent to do. They had to do without formality of consent. We were seized for the debts occasioned by their illness and their funerals and placed among the attractions of a cheap museum in Berlin, turned to liquidation money. It took us 2 years to get out of that slavery. We traveled all over Germany, receiving no wages, not even our keep, which had to be exhibited for nothing, and beg our bread. Well, madame, the rest is of not much consequence. We escaped by slavery at 12 years of age, and we're in some respects men. Experience had taught us some valuable things, among others, how to take care of ourselves, how to avoid and defeat sharks and shoppers, how to conduct ourselves in business for our own profit and without other people's help. We traveled everywhere, years and years, picking up smatterings of strange tongues, familiarizing ourselves with strange sights and strange customs, accumulating an education of wide and varied and curious sort. It was a pleasant life. We went to Venice, to London, Paris, Russia, India, China, Japan. At this point, Nancy, the slave woman, thrust her head in at the door and exclaimed, "Oh, missus, the house is plumb jam full of people, and they's just spilling to see the gentleman." She indicated the twins with a nod of her head and tucked back out of sight again. It was a proud occasion for the widow, and she promised herself high satisfaction in showing off her fine foreign birds before neighbors and friends, simple folk who had hardly ever seen a foreigner of any kind, never one of any distinction or style, yet a feeling was moderate indeed when contrasted with Rowena's. Rowena was in the clouds. She walked on air. This was her greatest day, the most romantic episode in the colorless history of that dull country town. She was to be familiar with near the sources of its glory and feel the full flood of it pour over her and about her. The other girls could only gaze with envy and not partake. The widow was ready. Rowena was ready. So also were the foreigners. The party moved along the hall, the twins in advance, entered the open parlor door, whence issued a low hum of conversation. The twins took a position near the door, and the window stood on Luigi's side. Rowena stood beside Angelo, and the march passed and the introductions began. The widow was all smiles and contentment. She received the possession and passed it on to Rowena. Good morning, Sister Cooper. Handshake. Good morning, Brother Higgins. Good morning, Luigi Capello. Mr. Higgins, handshake, followed by a devouring stare, and I'm glad to see you, on the part of Higgins, and a courteous inclination of the head, and a pleasant most happy on the part of Count Luigi. Good morning, Rowena. Handshake. Good morning, Mr. Higgins. Present you Count Angelo Capello. Handshaking, admiring stare. Glad to see you. Courteous nod, smiling, most happy. And Higgins passed on. None of these visitors was at ease, but being honest people, they didn't pretend to be. None of them had ever seen a person of bearing title of nobility before, and none had been expecting to see one now. Consequently, the title came upon them as a kind of pile-driving surprise and caught them unprepared. A few tried to rise to the emergency and got down awkward, my lord, or your lordship, or something of that sort, but the great majority were overwhelmed by the unaccustomed word and its dim and awful association with gilded courts and stately ceremony and anointed kingship, so they only fumbled through the handshake, passed on speechless. Now and then, as happens, all the receptions everywhere, more than ordinary friendly soul blocked the procession and kept it waiting while they inquired how the brothers liked the village, how long they were going to stay, if their family was well, dragged into the weather, and hoped it would get cooler soon, and all that quite sort of thing, so as to be able to say when he got home, I had quite a long talk with them, but nobody did or said anything of a regrettable kind, so the great affair went through to the end with a creditable and satisfactory fashion. General conversation followed, and the twins drifted about from group to group, talking easily and fluently, and winning approval, compelling admiration, and achieving favor from all. The widow followed their conquering march with a proud eye, and every now and then Rowena said to herself with deep satisfaction, "And to think they're ours, all ours." There were no idle moments for mother and daughter. Eager inquiries concerning the twins pouring in their enchanted ears all the time. Each was constant center of group, breathless listeners. Each recognized that she now, for the first time, the real meaning of the great word glory, and perceived the stupendous value of it, and understand why man in all ages had been willing to throw away meaner happiness, treasure, life itself, to get a taste of its sublime and supreme joy. Napoleon and all of his kind stood accounted for and justified. When Rowena at last done her duty by the people in the parlor, she went upstairs to satisfy the longings and the overflowed meeting there, for the parlor was not big enough to hold all the comers. Again she was besieged by eager questioners, and again she swam in sunset seas of glory. When the forenoon was nearly gone, she recognized with a pang that the most splendid episode of her life was almost over, that nothing could prolong it and nothing quite equal could ever fall her fortune again. But never mind, it was sufficient unto itself. The grand occasion had moved an ascendant scale from the start, and was noble and memorable success. If the twins could but do some crowning act now to climax it, something usual, something startling, something to concentrate upon themselves, the company's loftiest admiration, something in the nature of an electric surprise. Here a prodigious slam-banging broke out below, and everybody rushed down to see it. It was the twins, knocking out a classic four-handed piece on the piano in great style. Rowena was satisfied down to the bottom of her heart. The young strangers were kept long at the piano. The villagers were astonished and enchanted with the magnificence of their performance, and could not bear to have them stop. All the music they had ever heard before seemed spiritless apprentice work and barren grace and charm, which compared to these intoxicating floods of melodious sound. They realized that for once in their lives they was hearing masters. Chapter 7, The Unknown Nymph. One of the most striking differences between a cat and a lie is that the cat has only 9 lives. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. The company broke up reluctantly and drifted towards the several homes, chatting with vivacity, all agreeing that it would be many a long day before Dawson's landing would see equal of this one again. Their twins accepted several invitations while the reception was in progress, and had also volunteered to play some duets in an amateur entertainment for the benefit of a local charity. Society was eager to receive them to its bosom. Judge Driscoll had a good fortune to secure them an immediate drive to be the first to display them in public. They entered his buggy with him and were paraded down the main street. Everybody flocked to the windows and sidewalks to see. The judge showed the strangers the new graveyard, and the jail, and where the richest man lived, and the Freemasons' Hall, and the Methodist Church, and the Presbyterian Church, and where the Baptist Church was going to be when they got some money to build it with, and showed them Town Hall, and the slaughterhouse, and got out the independent fire company in uniform and had them put out an imaginary fire. He then let them inspect the muskets of the militia company and poured out an exhaustless stream of enthusiasm over these splendors and seemed very well satisfied with the responses he got, for the twins admired his admiration and paid him back best they could, though they could have done better if some 15 or 16,000 previous experiences of this sort in various countries had not already rubbed off a considerable part of the novelty in it. The judge laid himself at hospitality to make them have a good time. If there was a defect anywhere, it was not his fault. He told them a good many humorous anecdotes and always forgot the nub, but they were always able to furnish it. For these yarns were pretty of early vintage, and they had many a rejuvenating pool with them before. And he told them all about his several dignities, about how he once held this and that and other place of honor or profit, and once been a legislator, and now was the president of the Society of Free Thinkers. Said the society had been in existence 4 years, and already had 2 members, and was firmly established. He called for the brothers in the evening if they'd like to attend a meeting of it. Accordingly, he called for them, and on the way told them about Pudd'n Wilson, in order that they might get a favorable impression of him in advance and be prepared to like him. This scheme succeeded. The favorable impression was achieved. Later, it was confirmed and solidified when Wilson proposed, out of courtesy to the strangers, the usual topics be put aside, and an hour be devoted to conversation upon ordinary subjects and cultivation of friendly relations and good fellowship. A proposition which was put to vote and carried out. The hour passed quickly away in lively talk, and when it was ended, the lonesome and neglected Wilson was richer by 2 friends that he had been when it had began. He invited the twins to look at his lodgings, and presently, after disposing of an intervening engagement, they accepted with pleasure. Toward the middle of the evening, they found themselves on the road to his house. Pudd'nhead was home waiting for them, putting his time puzzling over a thing which happened to come to his notice that morning. The matter was this. He happened to be up very early at dawn. In fact, he crossed the hall, which divided his college to the center, and among the room to get something there. The window of the room had no curtains, for that side of the house had long been unoccupied, and through this window he caught sight of something which surprised and interested him. It was a young woman where properly no young woman belonged, for she was in Judge Driscoll's house, and in the bedroom over in the judge's private study or sitting room. This was young Tom Driscoll's bedroom. He and the judge's with his sister Mary Pratt, and 3 Negro servants were the only people who belonged in the house. Who then might this young lady be? The 2 houses had separated by an ordinary yard with low fences running back through the middle from the street to the front to the lane in the rear. The distance was not great, and Wilson was able to see the girl very well. The window shades aside of the room she was being in, and the window also. The girl had a neat and trim summer dress patterned in broad stripes of pink and white, and her bonnet was equipped with a pink veil. She was practicing steps, gaits, and attitudes, apparently. She was doing the thing gracefully, and she was being very much absorbed in her work. Who could she be, and how came she be in young Tom Driscoll's room? Wilson had quietly chosen a position from which he could watch the girl without running much risk of being seen by her, and he remained there, hoping she would raise her veil and betray her face. But she disappointed him. After a matter of 20 minutes, she disappeared, and altogether he stayed his post half an hour longer. She came no more. Toward noon, he dropped in at the judge's and talked with Miss Pratt about the great event of the day, the levee of the distinguished foreigners at Aunt Patsy Cooper's. He asked after her nephew Tom, and she said he was on his way home and that she was expecting him to arrive a little before night, and added she and the judge were gratified to gather from his letters that he'd been conducting himself very nicely and creditably, at which Wilson winked to himself privately. Wilson did not ask if there was a newcomer at the house. He asked questions that would have brought light-thrown answers as to the matter. Miss Pratt would have had any light to throw, so he went away satisfied he knew things that were going on in her house of which she herself was not aware. He was now waiting for the twins, still puzzling over the problem of who that girl might be and how she happened to be in the young fellow's room at daybreak in the morning. Chapter 8. Master Tom tramples his chance. The holy passion of friendship is so sweet and steady and loyal and enduring a nature that it will last to a whole lifetime, if not asked to lend money. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Consider well, proportion of things, it is better to be a young June bug than an old bird of paradise. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. It is necessary now to hunt up Roxy. At the time she was set free and went away chambermaiding, she was 35. She got a berth as a second chambermaid on a Cincinnati boat in the New Orleans trade, the Grand Mogul. A couple of trips made her wanted and easygoing at the work and infatuated her with the stir and adventure and independence of steamboat life. Then she was promoted and became the head chambermaid. She was a favorite with the officers and exceedingly proud of their joking and friendly way with her. During 8 years, she served 3 parts of the year on that boat, and the winters on a Vicksburg packet. Now, for 2 months, she had rheumatism in her arms and was obliged to leave the wash tub alone. So she resigned. But she was well-fixed rich, and she would have described it, for she had lived a steady life and banked $4 every month in New Orleans as a provision for her old age. She said in the start that she had put shoes on, barefooted nigger, and to trample her with, and the one mistake like was going to be enough, she'd be independent of the human race thenceforth forever if hard work and economy could accomplish it. And the boat touched the levee at New Orleans, and she bade goodbye to her comrades on the Grand Mogul and moved her kit ashore. But she was back in an hour. The bank had gone to smash and carried her $400 with it. She was a pauper and homeless, also disabled bodily, at least for the present. The officers were full of sympathy for her in trouble and made up a little purse for her. She resolved to go to her birthplace. She had friends there among the Negroes, and the unfortunate always helped the unfortunate. She was well aware of that. These lowly comrades of her youth would not let her starve. She took the little local packet at Cairo, and she was there in the home-stretch time and worn away her bitterness against her son, and she was able to think of him with serenity. She put the vile side of him out of her mind and dwelt only on recollections of his occasional acts of kindness to her. She gilded and otherwise decorated these and made them very pleasant to contemplate. She began to long to see him. She would go and fawn upon him slave-like, for this would have to be her attitude, of course, and maybe she would find time to modify him and be glad to see her long-forgotten old nurse and treat her gently. That would be lovely, and that would make her forget her woes and her poverty. Her poverty! That, though, inspired her to add another castle to her dream. Maybe he would give her a trifling now and then. Maybe $1 once a month, say. Any little thing that would help, oh, ever so much. By the time she reached Dawson's Landing, she was her old self again. Her blues were gone. She was in high feather. She would get along surely. There were many kitchens where the servants would share their meals with her and also steal sugar and apples and other dainties for her to carry home or give her a chance to pilfer in there for herself, which then she would just as well. And there was a church. She was more rabid and devoted Methodist than ever, and her piety was no sham, but was strong and sincere. Yes, with plenty of creature comforts in her old place and a man corner of her possessing again, she would be perfectly happy and at peace thenceforth to the end. She went to Judge Driscoll's kitchen first of all. She was received there in great form with vast enthusiasm. Her wonderful travels and strange countries she had seen, the adventures she had made her a marvel and heroine of romance. The negress hung enchanted upon the great story of her experiences, interrupting her all along with eager questions, with laughter, exclamations of delight, expressions of applause. She obliged to confess to herself that if anything was better in this world than steamboating, it was glory to be God about telling it. And the audience loaded her stomach with their dinners and stole the pantry bare to load up her basket. Tom was in St. Louis. The servant said he spent the best part of his time there during the previous 2 years. Roxy came every day, with many talks about the family and his affairs. When she asked why Tom was away so much, the ostensible Chambers said, "The fact is, old masters can get along better when young master's away than he can when he's in town. Yes, he loves him much better, too, so he gives him $50 a month." "No, is that so? Chambers, you're joking, ain't you?" "Child of goodness, I ain't, mammy. Master Tom told me his own self, but never mind, 'tain't enough." "My land, what the reason 'tain't enough?" Well, he's going to tell you if you give me a chance, Mammy. The reason ain't enough is 'cause Master Tom gambles. Roxy threw up her hands in astonishment, and Chambers went on. Old Master found out about it. Casey had to pay $200 for Master Tom's gambling debts, and that's true, Mammy. This is dead certain as he's born. $200? Wow, what is you talking about? $200? Shakes alive. It's most enough to buy to a good second-hand nigger with. And you ain't lying, honey? You wouldn't. He's your mammy. It's God's own truth, just as I tell you, $200. I wish I may never be stirring out of my tracks if it ain't so. And oh my land, old Moss was just a hopping. He was blilling mad, I'll tell you. But he done talk him dishurting him. Dissin' witching? Dissin' hurting him. What's that? What you mean? It means he's busted the will. Busted the will, he wouldn't even treat him, so take it back, you miserable imitation nigger that I born sorrow and tribulation. Roxy's pet castle, an occasional dollar from Tom's pocket, was tumbling to ruin before her eyes. She could not abide such a disaster as that. She couldn't endure the thought of it. Her remark amused Chambers. Yeah, just listen to that. It's I's imitation, what is you? Both and us imitation wife, that's what we is. And powerful good imitation, too. Yeah, we don't mount up for nothing. And imitation niggers and fall. Shut up, you fool, and fall and knock you side the head and tell me about, will you? This taint busted? Do, honey, I'll never forget you. Well, taint. K-State's making a new one, and Ma's Tom's all right again. What are you doing such a sick sweat about it for, Mammy? Tain't none of your business, I don't reckon. Tain't none of my business. Whose business is it then? I'd like to know. Was I his mother till he was 15 years old, wasn't I? You answer me that, and I'll speak as it's turned out po and ornery in the world, and I don't care nothing about it. Reckon on you ever been a mother yourself? That at your Chambers, you would not talk such foolishness as that. Well then, old Moss forgive him and fixed up the will again. Did it satisfy you? Yes, she was satisfied again and quite happy and sentimental over it. She kept coming daily, and at last she was told Tom had come home. She began to tremble with emotion and straightway sent a bag for him. His poor old nigger mama just to have one side of him with joy. Tom was stretched out in his lazy ease on the sofa when Chambers brought the petition. Tom had not modified his ancient detestation of the humble drudge and protector of his boyhood. It was still bitter and uncompromising. He sat up and bent a severe gaze upon the face of the young fellow whose name he was unconsciously using and whose family rights he was enjoying. He maintained the gaze until the victim of it had become satisfactorily pallid with terror, and he said, "What does old Rip want with me?" The petition was meekly repeated. "Who gave you permission to come and disturb me with social attentions of niggers?" Tom had risen. The other young man was trembling, now visibly. He saw what was coming and bent his head sideways and put up his left arm and shielded. Tom rained cuffs upon his head, and its shield saying no word, the victim received each blow with the beseeching, "Please, Master Tom! Oh, please, Master Tom!" 7 blows, and then Tom said, "Face the door, march!" He followed behind with 1, 2, 3 solid kicks. The last one helped the pure white slave over the door sill. And he limped away, mopping his eyes with his old ragged sleeve, and Tom shouted after him, "Send her in." He then flung himself, panting, on the sofa again and rasped out the remark, "He arrived just at the right moment. I was full to the brim with bitter thinkings, and nobody to take it out of. How refreshing it was. I feel better." Tom's mother entered now, closing the door behind her, and approached her son with all the wheedling, supplications, civilities that fear and interest can impart in the words and attitude of their born slave. She stopped a yard from her boy and made 2 or 3 admiring exclamations over its manly stature and general handsomeness. Tom put an arm under his head and hoisted a leg over the sofa back to look properly indifferent. "My land, how you grown, honey. Child to goodness, I wouldn't have knowed you, Master Tom. Deed I wouldn't. Look at me good. Does you remember old Roxy? Does you know your old nigger mammy, honey? Well, now I can lay down and die in peace. Seest I seed? Cut it short, goddammit. Cut it short. What do you want?" You hear that? Just the same old Master Tom. Always so gay and funning with his old mammy. It's just as short. Cut it short, I tell you, and get along. What do you want? There was a bit of disappointment. Roxy had for so many days nursed and fondled and petted her notion that Tom would be glad to see his old nurse and make her proud and happy to the marrow with a cordial word or two. But it took 2 rebuffs to convince her that he was not bunning. Her beautiful dream was fond and foolish variety, a shabby and pitiful mistake. She was hurt to the heart and so ashamed that for a moment she had not begun quite to know what to do, how to act. Then her breast began to heave, then the tears came, and the forlornness she was moved to try the other dream of hers and appeal to her boy's charity. So upon the impulse and without reflection, she offered a supplication. "Oh, Mas Tom, the poor old mammy is in such sick hard luck these days, and she's kind of crippled in the arms and can't work. And if you could give me $1, only just one little dot." Tom was suddenly on his feet so suddenly that the supplicant was startled to jump herself. $1? Give you $1? I've a notion to strangle you. Your errand here? Clear out. Be quick about it. Roxy backed out slowly toward the door. When she was halfway, she stopped and said mournfully, "Mas Tom, I nursed you when you was a little baby, and then I raised you all by myself until you was a most young man, and now you's young and rich, and I poor, getting old, and I come around behaving that you would help old Mammy along down the little road that's left twixt in her grave, and..." Tom relished his tune less than any he preceded it, for it began to wake up a sort of echo in his conscience. So he interrupted and said with decision, though without asperity, that he was not in a situation to help her, and wasn't going to do it. "Ain't you ever going to help me, Mas Tom?" "No, now go away and don't bother me no more." Roxy's head was down in an attitude of humility, but now the fires of her old wrongs flamed up in her breast and began to burn fiercely. She raised her head slowly till it was well up, and at the same time her great frame unconsciously assumed an erect and masterful attitude. With all the majesty and grace of her vanished youth in it, she raised her finger and punctuated with it. "You has said the word, you has had your chance, and you has trampled it under your foot. When you get another one, you'll get down on your knees and beg for it." A cold chill went to Tom's heart. He didn't know why, for he did not reflect that such words coming from such an incongruous source, so solemnly delivered, could not easily fail that effect. However, he did the natural thing. He replied with bluster and mockery. "You'll give me a chance, you? Perhaps I better get down on my knees now, because in case I don't, just for argument's sake, what's going to happen, pray?" "This and what's going to happen. I'm going to straighten your uncle, and I can walk and tell him every last things I know about you." Tom's cheeks blanched, and she saw it. Disturbing thoughts began to chase each other through his head. How can she know? Yet she must have found out. She looks it. I've had the will back only 3 months, and I'm in deep debt again, moving heaven and earth to save myself from exposure and destruction, with a reasonably fair show of getting the thing covered up if I'm left alone. And now this fiend has gone and found me out somehow or other. I wonder how much she knows. Oh, it's enough to break a body's heart. But I've got to humour her. There's no other way. And he worked up a rather sickly sample of gay laughter and hollow chipperness of manner and said, "Well, Roxy dear, old friends like you and me mustn't quarrel. Here's your $1. Now tell me what you know." He held out a wildcat bill. She stood as she was and made no movement. It was her turn to scorn pervasive foolery now, and she had not wasted. She said with almost grim implacability of voice and manner, which made Tom almost realize that even a former slave can remember for 10 minutes insults and injuries returned for compliments and flatteries received, and can also enjoy taking revenge from them when opportunity offers. "What does I know? I'll tell you what I knows. I knows enough bust that will's finders and more, mind you, more." Tom was aghast. "More? What do you call more? Where's there any room for more?" Roxy laughed a mocking laugh and said scoffingly with a toss of her head and hands on her hip, "Yes, so I reckon, 'cause you'd like to know. Would you, po' old rag dollar? What you gonna reckon I'm gonna tell you for? You ain't got no money. Is going to tell your uncle, and at this minute he'll give me $5 for the news, and mighty glad too." She swung herself around disdainfully and started away. Tom was in a panic. He seized her skirts and implored her to wait. She turned and said loftily, "Look-a here. What's I's told you? You told me I don't remember anything. What was it you told me?" "I told you that next time I give you a chance, you get down on your knees and beg for it." Tom was stupefied a moment. He was panting with excitement. Then he said, "Oh, Roxy, you wouldn't require your young master to do such a horrible thing. You can't mean it. I'll let you know mighty quick whether I mean it or not. You call me names and couldn't spit on me when I come here. Po ornery and humble, the present you growed up so fine and handsome. When I tell you how I used to nurse you and tend you and watch you when you were sick and hadn't a mother, and you need the whole world and beg you to give a poor nigger $1 for a sar to eat, and you can call me names. Names, Dad blind you. Yes, sir, I gives you just one more chance. That's now, and if it don't last half a second, you hear?" Tom slumped to his knees and began to beg, saying, "You see, I'm begging. I'm begging as honest begging, too. Now tell me. Roxy, tell me." The hair of 2 centuries of unatoned insult and outrage looked down on him and seemed drinking deep draughts of satisfaction. Then she said, "Fine, nice white gentleman kneeling down to a nigger wench. As I wanted to see that just once before that's called. Now, Gabriel, blow the horn. I'm ready. Get up." Tom did. He said humbly, "Now, Roxy, don't punish me anymore. I deserve what I got, but be good and tell me off with that. Don't go to Uncle. Tell me I'll give you $5. "Yes, I bet you will. And you won't stop there, another. I ain't going to tell you, hear?" "Good gracious, no." "Is you feared of the haunted house?" "No." "Well, then, you's come to the haunted house about 10, 11 tonight, and climbed up the ladder, case the stair steps done broken down, and you'll find me. There's a roosting in the haunted house, case I don't fall to roost nowhere else." She started towards the door, but stopped and said, "Give me my dollar bill." He gave it to her. She examined it and said, "Like enough the bank's busted." She started again, but halted again. "Has you got any whiskey?"